My son told me, "Don't bring Mom. She ruins the photo." That night, I sold his apartment without telling him. There are words that cut through your soul like a rusty knife, leaving wounds that never quite heal. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for just a second, this feels familiar to you, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 68 years old. And on that October afternoon in New York, as I was making my usual coffee with a splash of milk in my small, white-tiled kitchen, I received the call that split my life in two. It was my son Ethan, my only son, using that cold voice he'd learned to use when he wanted to keep his distance. "Mom, about Isabella's birthday on Saturday," he began, and I was already smiling, picturing my 5-year-old granddaughter running through a sea of pink balloons. I had been sewing her dress for weeks, stitch by stitch, with the kind of patience only grandmothers have for creating treasures with their own hands. "What is it, sweetheart? Do you need me to bring anything else? I've already made the mac and cheese she loves so much, and also—" "No, Mom. Listen to me." His voice turned drier, like when he was a teenager and would scold me for embarrassing him in front of his friends. "About the party. It's better if you don't come." The world stopped. The spoon I was holding fell against the saucer with a clink that echoed in the sudden silence of my kitchen. Through the window, I could see my neighbors in Greenpoint coming home from work, carrying grocery bags, living their normal lives while mine fell apart. "What do you mean, don't come?" "Ethan, she's my granddaughter, my only granddaughter." "Look, Mom." And then came the final blow, delivered with a chill that freezes your blood. "Don't bring Mom. She ruins the photo. We're hiring a professional photographer, a very expensive one, and we need everything to look elegant. You know how you are with your usual clothes and that habit you have of trying to organize everything. Besides, Jessica invited people from her firm, important people, and we don't want them to get the wrong idea. Ruins the photo." Those 3 words drove into my chest like poisoned daggers. I, who had raised that man with my own 2 hands after his father left us when he was just 8 years old. I, who worked double shifts as a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital for 20 years to pay for the private university he so desperately wanted. I, who sold my mother's jewelry to give him the down payment when he married Jessica and they needed a condo on the Upper East Side. Now, I was an aesthetic problem, an embarrassment to be hidden from important people. "Ethan, please." My voice cracked like old glass. "She's my granddaughter. I just want to be there to—" "It's already decided, Mom. Understand. It's better for everyone." He hung up, just like that. No, "I love you." No, "I'm sorry." Nothing to soften the poison he had just injected straight into my heart. I stood there in my kitchen, looking at my reflection in the window pane. A 68-year-old woman, her hair in a simple bun, wearing the apron my mother-in-law gave me 30 years ago. The same one I had worn to cook thousands of meals for my son when he was little and told me I was the best mom in the world. When had I stopped being that? When had I become someone who ruined the photos? The tears came without warning, hot and silent, as my mind replayed all the moments I had given everything for him. I remembered the sleepless nights when he had a fever, reading him stories until dawn painted his bedroom walls pink. I remembered when he graduated from college and hugged me in the campus auditorium, whispering in my ear that none of it would have been possible without me. I remembered when Isabella was born, 5 years ago, and he cried with emotion, telling me he wanted me to be the most present grandmother in the world, that his daughter needed to know all the love I had given him. Where did that man go? When had he allowed his wife to convince him that his own mother was a social liability? That night, as I stirred the lentil soup that had gone cold on the stove, I thought about the apartment. My apartment. The 3-bedroom on Park Avenue that I had bought with my life savings. With the money I earned caring for the sick on night shifts that broke my back. The same apartment I had lent them temporarily 3 years ago when Jessica got pregnant and they needed more space. I never charged them rent. I never asked for a single dollar for HOA fees. I just wanted my son and my granddaughter to have a comfortable life, to not go through the hardships I had known. But now, sitting in my small rental in Greenpoint, surrounded by the furniture that didn't fit into their elegant home, I realized a truth that hurt more than any illness. I had raised a son who was ashamed of me. In the early hours of the morning, with New York sleeping outside my window and the weight of loneliness crushing my chest, I made a decision that would change everything. I took out the apartment papers from my dresser, the documents I kept next to Isabella's baby photos, and the love letters no one ever wrote me. My name was there, clear as day. Helen Carter, sole owner. At dawn, as I made black coffee because I no longer had the stomach for milk, I dialed the number for Park Avenue Realty, the same agency that had helped me buy the apartment years ago. Good morning, this is Helen Carter. I want to sell a condo on Park Avenue. Urgently. Without notifying the current tenants. The agent's voice sounded surprised but professional. Of course, Miss Carter. Can we see it this afternoon? And so it began. So began my liberation. Because sometimes when someone tells you that you ruin the photo, the only dignified response is to remove yourself from the frame and take the frame with you. The appraisal came the next day. $2.5 million. $2.5 million that represented every night shift I worked while Ethan slept. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself so he could have the best. The real estate agent, a young man in an impeccable suit, looked at me with that mix of respect and curiosity an older woman selling such a valuable property inspires. This is an extraordinary investment, Ms. Carter. A condo like this on Park Avenue. It's quintupled in value since you bought it. Capital. Investment. To me, they were just words for the nights I didn't sleep, the meals I skipped, the dresses I didn't buy. But I smiled and signed the preliminary papers. In 2 weeks, the apartment would no longer be mine, nor his. That afternoon, as I organized the photographs I kept in a shoebox, my mind drifted to all the times I had put my son above everything else. They weren't sweet memories now. They were emotional invoices that had never been paid. I remembered when he was 14 and asked for a PlayStation for Christmas. I was working the night shift at the hospital then, earning a salary that barely covered the rent on our small apartment in Queens. But seeing his face light up was worth any sacrifice. I sold the engagement ring I had inherited from my grandmother, a white gold piece with small diamonds that was my only valuable possession. "Mom, you're the best. I promise I'll take good care of it," he had said, hugging me with the force only genuinely happy children have. The PlayStation lasted 2 years before he traded it for the next model. My grandmother's ring never came back. When he turned 18, he wanted to do a summer exchange program in London. "It's crucial for my future, Mom. English will open so many doors for me." He was right, of course. But the program cost $8,000 that I didn't have. I took out a personal loan that I spent 3 years paying off, working extra shifts on weekends while he explored museums and pubs in England. The photos he sent filled me with pride. My son at Big Ben, in front of Buckingham Palace, smiling with the confidence that only comes from feeling you're in the right place in the world. "Thanks, Mom. This is going to change my life," he wrote in texts I saved like treasures. And it did change his life. It gave him the level of English he needed to get a job at a multinational corporation, the same job that now allowed him to pay for expensive photographers for parties where his mother ruined the photos. Then came college, a private university, of course. I won't have the same networking opportunities at a public school, Mom. I need to be where the people who will help me in the future are. $60,000 a year for 5 years. I took out a mortgage on the apartment I had just finished paying off to get that money. During those college years, Ethan lived like a prince. Designer clothes, nights out with friends at restaurants where dinner cost what I earned in a week, vacations in the Hamptons every summer. "It's important to maintain a certain status, Mom. The connections I make here are going to be crucial for my career." And I would nod, proud that my son was thinking so strategically about his future. I worked double shifts, sold the few valuables I had left, and lived on ham and cheese sandwiches so he could eat at restaurants with white tablecloths. When he graduated, summa cum laude, I cried with emotion at the ceremony. I was wearing the same dress I had worn for his first communion, but it didn't matter. Seeing my son receive his diploma, hearing his academic honors announced, feeling the admiring glances of other parents, all the suffering had been worth it. Or so I thought then. Then came Jessica, a beautiful girl from a wealthy family, with a degree from abroad and the self-assurance that comes from growing up without financial worries. The first time he brought her home, I noticed how she looked at our small apartment in Queens, how her eyes lingered on the worn-out furniture, the old television, the curtains I had sewn myself because I couldn't afford to buy new ones. "Your mother is charming," she told Ethan that night, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can tell she loves you very much." From then on, visits to my home became scarce. Ethan started suggesting we meet at coffee shops in Manhattan to get to know each other better in a neutral environment. Neutral, as if my home were hostile territory. When they got engaged, they organized an engagement dinner at a restaurant, Daniel. $350 a plate. "It's important for Jessica's family to see that we know how to move in these circles, Mom," Ethan explained when I told him I couldn't afford that dinner. In the end, I faked a migraine and didn't go. I sent my congratulations and a gift I bought at Bloomingdale's with my credit card, already maxed out but capable of one last effort. The wedding was another financial ordeal. My son asked me to contribute what I could to the celebration. "We just want you to feel part of this, Mom. Your contribution is important to us, no matter the amount." I gave him $20,000, the last of my savings after paying for his education. Jessica had specifically asked for it in cash, to avoid banking complications. I never knew exactly what that money was spent on, but the wedding was spectacular. 300 guests at a beautiful estate upstate, a live orchestra, fireworks, 5-star catering. I sat at table 9, with distant relatives and childhood friends Ethan hadn't seen in years. Jessica had arranged the tables strategically, putting the important families near the bride and groom, and relegating the others to the back. During the first dance, my son came over briefly. "Thanks for everything, Mom. None of this would have been possible without you." He kissed me on the cheek and went back to dancing with his radiant new wife, stunning in a designer dress that cost more than my annual salary. Then came the first years of marriage. Family dinners became sporadic, always with perfectly reasonable excuses. We're establishing our own traditions as a couple. Jessica wants us to spend more time with her family. We have social commitments that are important for my career. When Isabella was born, I thought everything would change. My granddaughter would give me back the place I had lost in my son's life. The first few months were beautiful. Ethan called me constantly for advice. Jessica seemed grateful for my help with the baby. But soon, the subtle comments began. "Mom, I think Isabella eats better when we give her the baby food Jessica makes. Maybe you shouldn't hold her so much. Modern pediatricians say it's better for them to learn to self-soothe. Jessica has read a lot about parenting. Maybe you should follow her lead." Little by little, my role was reduced to being a free babysitter when they needed to go out, but with no say in the important decisions about my granddaughter. And now, looking at these faded photographs from birthdays and graduations where I appeared smiling, proud of my son, I wondered when exactly I had started to become an embarrassment. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was the real estate agent, Ms. "Carter, I have good news. We already have a buyer. A young couple, paying cash. They can close next week." I hung up and looked out the window of my small rental apartment. Tomorrow night would be Isabella's party. The party where I wouldn't be because I ruined the photos. But next week, when my son received the eviction notice, he would understand that some photos can be ruined in ways he never imagined. Saturday arrived like a punch to the gut. From my window in Greenpoint, I could see entire families walking down the street with balloons and wrapped gifts, kids in party dresses holding their grandmother's hands, all those everyday scenes that had become impossible for me. I stayed in my pajamas until 3 in the afternoon. There was no point in getting dressed to go anywhere. I had nowhere to go. At 4:30, when I knew the party would have already started, I couldn't resist. I opened Instagram on my phone, the app Ethan had taught me to use to stay connected with the family, Mom. The irony. The first photos appeared immediately. The hashtag #DrainIsabella'sBig5 already had a dozen posts. My granddaughter, gorgeous in a pink tulle dress, smiling in front of a pastel-themed dessert table that must have cost more than my monthly salary when I was working. Helium balloons floated to the ceiling of what I recognized as a ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. The Plaza Hotel. For a 5-year-old's birthday. I kept scrolling. Jessica had documented every detail with the precision of a professional photographer. The bouncy castle, the magician doing tricks, the candy bar that looked like it was straight out of a luxury magazine. Every photo had dozens of hearts and admiring comments. What a beautiful princess! Party of the year! Isabella is so lucky to have such amazing parents. The same faces appeared in every photo. Jessica's parents, elegant and smiling, posing with Isabella as if they were the only grandparents in the world. Jessica's siblings with their spouses and children, all dressed for a gala. Ethan's college friends, the ones I had watched grow up over years of family gatherings, now successful adults with expensive ties and watches that shone brighter than my broken hopes. But there was one absence that screamed in silence. Me. I wasn't even mentioned in any photo. It was as if I had never existed. As if Isabella had been born without a paternal grandmother. As if Ethan had emerged from thin air, with no mother to raise him. No woman to sacrifice her youth to give him a future. At 6 p.m, photos of the cake moment appeared on the screen. Isabella, radiant, blowing out 5 little candles while everyone sang. In the background was a table piled high with brightly wrapped presents, bags from famous toy stores, toys that cost what I spent on groceries for a month. My gift was still in my dresser, a photo album I had been preparing for weeks, filled with pictures of Isabella since she was a baby, with handwritten notes telling anecdotes from each moment. Your first step was into Nana's arms. Here you were 6 months old and you fell asleep on my lap. This is from when you learned to say Nana, and you wouldn't stop. 50 pages of pure love that would never reach her hands. I closed my phone and poured myself a glass of cheap wine from Trader Joe's. I toasted alone, to the birthdays I wouldn't see, to the hugs I wouldn't receive, to the granddaughter who would grow up without ever really knowing her paternal grandmother. On Monday morning, the notary's office called to confirm the appointment. Ms. Carter, tomorrow at 11 o'clock sharp. The buyers are very excited. It's an exceptional property. I just need you to confirm. Are you absolutely sure about this decision? Completely. Perfect. Oh, and one more thing. The new owners want to do major renovations. They'll need the apartment to be completely empty in 2 weeks. Are the current tenants aware? A bitter smile formed on my lips. They'll find out soon enough. That afternoon, while walking through Central Park trying to calm the anxiety eating me alive, I saw something that broke my heart into even smaller pieces. It was Jessica, pushing Isabella's stroller along the main path. They weren't alone. With them was an elegant woman in her 60s, with perfectly coiffed hair and clothes that screamed money from every seam. Jessica's mother, the other grandmother. I watched them from a distance, hiding behind a newsstand, feeling like a stalker in my own granddaughter's life. Isabella ran happily among the trees while the 2 women chatted animatedly on a bench. I could see Jessica's mother give Isabella something, probably another expensive gift, and how my granddaughter hugged her naturally. That was the relationship I had lost. Those Sunday strolls, those intimate conversations, those everyday moments that build childhood memories. All of that had been given to another woman, while I became a ghost in my own family's life. Jessica took pictures of Isabella with the other grandmother. More images for Instagram. More evidence of the perfect family they had built without me. I wondered if they would ever tell Isabella about me. If she would know she had another grandmother who loved her desperately from a distance. I went home with a heart heavier than ever. A surprise was waiting for me in my mailbox. A formal invitation, printed on thick cardstock with gold lettering. Helen Carter is cordially invited to the launch of Ethan Carter's new investment project at the Manhattan Investors Club. Cocktail attire, RSVP requested. My son had organized an event to launch his new investment project. An event to which he was formally inviting me, as if I were a business acquaintance, and not the woman who had mortgaged her life to pay for the education that now allowed him to rub elbows with millionaires. The date was for the following week. The same week, he would receive notice that he had lost his home. I put the invitation in the drawer next to the papers for the apartment sale. There was a certain poetic justice in the timing. While he was celebrating his financial achievements in front of investors who managed bitcoins and multi-million-dollar portfolios, I would be signing the documents that would take his roof away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about all of Ethan's birthdays I had celebrated alone after he moved out. Every March 23rd for the last 10 years, I would buy a small cake from my neighborhood bakery, light a candle, and sing happy birthday in my empty kitchen. He never knew about those solitary celebrations. I never told him that every year at 3:47 a.m., the exact time he was born, I would wake up and relive the moment I first held him, when he was only mine, when I was his entire world. Now Isabella would have birthdays without me, just as her father had learned to live without me. The difference was, she wouldn't even know what she was missing. To her, I would just be an absence she would never notice, because I had never really been present in her life. On Tuesday, I received another message from Jessica in the family WhatsApp group, a group where I was basically a silent spectator to the lives that went on without me. Thank you to everyone who made Isabella's party so perfect, especially to Grandma and Grandpa Morgan for their generosity and love. Isabella can't stop talking about what a wonderful time she had. The Morgans. That's how she referred to her parents, as if they were the only relevant grandparents in Isabella's life. I didn't even deserve a thank you for not being there to ruin the photos. That afternoon, I signed the final sale documents. $2.5 million were transferred to my bank account with the cold efficiency of modern technology. It was more money than I had ever had in my life, more wealth than I had ever dreamed of accumulating. But it felt like dirty money, like the price they had paid for me to disappear from my son's life. The notary handed me the keys to give to the new owners. A very clean transaction, Ms. Carter. The buyers are delighted. I left the notary's office with a thick envelope containing documents certifying that I no longer owned anything my son could claim as his. For the first time in years, I was completely free and completely alone. That night, I ordered Chinese food and sat on my sofa to watch an old movie on TV. The sounds of New York living its normal life came through the window. Couples arguing, children playing in the courtyard, the constant hum of a city that never fully sleeps. Somewhere in that city, my granddaughter was sleeping in a bed that would soon no longer be hers. My son was planning investment events he would soon be unable to afford. My daughter-in-law was dreaming of a luxurious life that was about to evaporate. And I was there, with $2.5 million in the bank and a heart emptier than ever, wondering if revenge really tasted as sweet as they say, or if, in the end, it just tasted like the salty tears I couldn't stop crying. On Thursday morning at 8:47, my phone exploded. Ethan was calling with a desperation that only appears when the world falls apart without warning. His voice was broken, almost unrecognizable, like a lost child screaming for his mother in a mall. "What the hell did you do, Mom? What the hell did you do?" I remained silent, sipping my coffee slowly, savoring every second of the call I had been waiting for 3 days. Outside my window, New York was waking up to its usual routine, oblivious to the personal earthquake my son was experiencing. "Good morning, Ethan. What are you talking about?" "The apartment. Some people showed up with keys this morning saying they're the new owners. Jessica is crying. Isabella is asking why there are strangers in her house. How could you do this?" There it was. The moment I had been imagining since I signed those papers. The realization that everything they took for granted, everything they believed was theirs by right, had been an illusion. The apartment was mine, Ethan. It was always mine, and I decided to sell it. But we live there. It's our home. Our home. How funny that he called it our home now, when for years it had been his home whenever I wanted to visit unannounced, whenever I suggested changes to the decor, whenever I tried to feel a part of the life that unfolded within those walls I had paid for. "Your home? The same home you don't want me in because I ruined the photos?" A tense silence fell. I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end of the line, the sound of Jessica crying in the background, Isabella's confused voice asking what was wrong. "Mom, that was... I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean what? That I'm an embarrassment? That my presence damages the image you want to project? That after raising you for 35 years, I'm now only good for being hidden away when important people come over? It was just a party. It wasn't personal. It was my granddaughter's birthday. There is nothing more personal than that." Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, His voice had changed. It was no longer the desperation of the first moment. It was something more calculated, more manipulative. The tone he used at work when he needed to convince someone of a risky investment. Look, Mom, I understand you're hurt. You're right, I messed up. But this is a massive overreaction. Do you know how much it's going to cost us to find another apartment in that area? Do you know I'll have to take out a loan for the security deposit? My portfolio is all tied up in long-term projects. I don't have the liquid cash for... And there it was again, my son's true face. He wasn't apologizing for humiliating me. He wasn't sorry for treating me like an inconvenience. He was complaining about the financial consequences of his actions. Ethan, for 3 years, you lived for free in a condo worth $2.5 million. That's hundreds of thousands in rent you never paid me. If you need cash, I suppose you'll have to sell some of those important investments. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me, not screw up my life. That phrase, screw up my life, as if helping him his whole life was my obligation, but respecting the woman who did it all for him was optional. I helped you for 35 years. I paid for your college. I gave you money for the wedding. I lent you my apartment without charging you rent. The only thing I asked for in return was respect. And you told me I ruined the photos. For God's sake, it was an elegant party. Jessica had important clients from her firm there. We couldn't afford to have them. Have them what? See that you have a working-class mother? Find out you weren't born into a family of millionaires? For the first time in the conversation, he fell completely silent. I had hit a nerve, the truth he had never wanted to admit. He was ashamed of his origins. He was ashamed of me. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder, crueler. You know what, Mom? You're right. I am ashamed. I'm ashamed to have a mother who doesn't understand that the world has changed, who still dresses like it's the 1980s, who doesn't know how to act in certain settings. Jessica and I have worked very hard to build a life of a certain standard, and yes, sometimes your presence complicates things. Every word was a stab, but strangely, instead of hurting, it liberated me. I was finally hearing the truth. My son was finally showing his true colors. At least now you're being honest. And now that we're being honest, let me tell you something else. This apartment isn't just my problem. Isabella is going to have to change schools because we can't afford a private one in that area anymore. She's going to lose her friends. She's going to have to adjust to a cheaper neighborhood. She's going to live in a smaller place. Are you willing to live with that? With traumatizing your own granddaughter over a tantrum? There it was. The final manipulation. Using Isabella as an emotional weapon, turning the consequences of his own decisions into my guilt. Isabella will adjust. Children are stronger than you think, and maybe learning that not everything can be bought with money will do her some good. You're unbelievable. You're willing to destroy your own granddaughter's life out of pride. No, Ethan. You're willing to destroy your relationship with your mother to keep up appearances. I hung up. Immediately, the phone started ringing again. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I let it go again. On the third try, I turned it off completely. I needed silence to process what had just happened. For years, I had lied to myself, telling myself that Ethan loved me, but that Jessica was a bad influence. That deep down, he was still the loving little boy who would hug me when he had nightmares. But that conversation had shattered all my illusions. The words he had used, I'm ashamed. Your presence complicates things. You don't know how to act. Were not a product of the heat of the moment. They came from a much deeper place, from years of accumulated resentment, from a gradual transformation I had chosen not to see. My son had become someone who valued the opinion of strangers more than the heart of his mother. Mid-morning, the doorbell rang. It was Jessica, with Isabella holding her hand. My granddaughter was in her school uniform, looking at everything with the innocent curiosity of children who don't understand why adults are always so upset. Helen, we need to talk. It was the first time in years Jessica had come to my home, the first time she had set foot in my small Greenpoint apartment with its modest furniture and handmade curtains. I could see her eyes scanning the space with that mix of pity and superiority I had learned to recognize all too well. Hi, Nana, Isabella said. running toward me with a spontaneity the adults hadn't managed to corrupt yet. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her scent of baby shampoo and innocence. 5 years without being able to hug her freely, 5 years of imposed distance. And now I had her in my arms only because they needed something from me. "Look, Helen," Jessica began, perching on the edge of the sofa as if she were afraid of catching poverty. "I understand you're hurt. Ethan told me what happened, and you're right. He shouldn't have said that about the party. But what you've done is very serious. Very serious. Selling my own apartment is serious? Doing it without telling us. Knowing we'd be left homeless overnight, yes. It's serious. We have a daughter, Helen. A daughter who adores you and who doesn't understand why she suddenly has to move." Isabella had found my photo album and was flipping through it with fascination, pointing at pictures of herself as a baby she didn't remember seeing. "Is that me, Nana?" "Yes, my love. That's you when you were 6 months old." "Why aren't Mommy and Daddy in this picture?" Jessica tensed. It was a photo I had taken of Isabella during one of my rare supervised visits. One of those afternoons when they allowed me to watch her for a few hours while they went out. "Because Nana was taking care of you that day," I explained gently. "Like a babysitter?" Isabella's innocent question fell like a bomb in the silence of the apartment. A babysitter? Was that what my granddaughter thought I was? An occasional employee instead of her grandmother? Jessica cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Isabella, why don't you play with the toys we brought while Mommy talks to Nana?" When Isabella was distracted, Jessica looked me directly in the eye for the first time in years. "Look, Helen, I know you think I'm the villain in this story, that I'm the one who pulled Ethan away from you, but the truth is more complicated. I'm listening. Ethan told me things about his childhood, about what it was like living here, the constant worry about money, how you worked so much that he felt lonely, how there was always this pressure to be grateful for sacrifices he never asked for. Every word was like a whip. Was that how my son remembered his childhood? As a time of hardship and pressure, instead of love and dedication? When we met, he told me he wanted to build a different life, without the financial anxiety that defined his childhood, without his child growing up feeling like a financial burden to their parents. I never made him feel like a burden, maybe not consciously, but he remembers every time you cried while looking at the bills, every time you sold something to pay for something he wanted, every time you worked extra to cover his expenses. That leaves a mark on a child, Helen. I was speechless. All these years, I had thought my sacrifices were gestures of love. But maybe for a child, watching his mother constantly suffer for his sake had been traumatic in a way I never understood. We just want Isabella to grow up without that pressure, without feeling like she has to earn her parents' love by being grateful for things children should take for granted. And that's why you keep me away from her? That's why we want her time with you to be about joy, not obligation. So she doesn't feel the tension that Ethan felt during his childhood. For the first time in years, Jessica was speaking to me without a mask, without the fake smile and the euphemisms. She was telling me the truth as she saw it, and that truth shattered me more than any insult. After Jessica and Isabella left, I sat on my sofa for hours, watching the afternoon light filter through the curtains I had sewn with my own hands 20 years ago. For the first time in decades, the silence didn't hurt. There was no one waiting for me to cook, to clean, to smile, to be the perfect, selfless mother everyone took for granted. It was Friday night, and for the first time in my adult life, I had absolutely nothing to do. No family obligations, no commitments, no calls waiting to be returned. Just me, my small but mine apartment, and $2.5 million in a bank account no one else knew about. I got up and went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and realized something extraordinary. I could eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without having to think about whether someone else would like it, or if there was enough for 2 or 3 people. There was a can of mussels that had been sitting there for months, waiting. Ethan hated them. "They smell awful, Mom. I don't know how you can eat that." So I never made them when he visited, which lately was never, but the habit of not cooking what he didn't like had remained. That night I had mussels with toast and a glass of white wine. I sat on my small balcony overlooking the inner courtyard, listening to the neighbors' conversations, a baby crying, the sound of a TV from the next apartment. Real life, life without pretense. On Saturday morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. There was no one to call to ask how they slept, no family plans to coordinate, no Sunday meals to plan that no one would truly appreciate. I stayed in bed until 10, reading a book I had bought months ago and never had time to open. It was a novel about a woman traveling through Europe alone after a divorce. The protagonist was my age and described the feeling of walking through unknown streets without having to explain to anyone where she was going or when she would be back. Something stirred in my chest as I read, a strange, almost forgotten feeling, curiosity, a desire for something that had nothing to do with caring for others or sacrificing for someone else's well-being. When was the last time I had felt that? I dressed slowly, choosing clothes I liked without thinking if they were appropriate for a woman my age, or if they might embarrass someone at a family gathering. I put on a blue dress I had bought on sale 2 years ago and had never dared to wear because Jessica had once commented that such bright colors aren't flattering on older women. I went for a walk through the city with no destination in mind. I passed by the Brooklyn Flea, stopped in small secondhand bookstores, went into a coffee shop I had never visited before, and ordered a coffee with a slice of carrot cake that cost more than I usually allowed myself for treats. The cake was delicious. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite, watching people pass by the window. Young couples, families with children, women my age who were alone and seemed perfectly comfortable in their own company. In the afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since Ethan was little. I went to the movies by myself. I chose a subtitled French film that he would have surely found pretentious and Jessica boring. It was the story of a female chef who rebelled against family expectations and opened her own restaurant in Provence. I left the theater feeling different, lighter, as if I had shed a weight I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. On Sunday, I decided to do something completely impulsive, something the Helen of a week ago would never have dared to do. I walked into a travel agency. "Good morning. I'd like some information on trips for a mature woman," I corrected myself. I wasn't a senior. I was 68, with a lot of life left to live. The agent, a young woman with a genuine smile, showed me brochures for Mediterranean cruises, cultural tours of Italy, gentle hiking trails in the Rockies. "Are you traveling alone?" she asked without judgment, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Yes, it's my first time." "How exciting! We have many clients who prefer to travel alone. They say it's liberating." Liberating. That word echoed in my head for the rest of the day. On Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan again. This time he sounded different. Less aggressive, more calculating. "Mom, I've been thinking about what we talked about. You're right about some things. Maybe I was too hard on you." I didn't answer right away. I had learned to recognize that tone. It was the same one he used when he wanted something important from me. "I've spoken with Jessica, and we've decided we want to fix things. We want Isabella to have a close relationship with you." "Oh, really?" "Yes. In fact, we were thinking you could help us with something. You know my investment project is taking off. I have several clients interested in diversifying their portfolios, but I need some seed money to prove its viability. Since you now have that significant amount from the sale..." There it was. What he really wanted. My money. "You could invest with us. Be part of the family business. It would be a way for Isabella to see that we all work together, that we're a team." A team. How interesting that he wanted us to be a team now, just when I had something he needed. "How much do you need?" "Well, for starters, about $200,000 would be good. It's a safe investment, Mom. In 2 years, you could double that amount. Think of it as Isabella's college fund, but generating returns in the meantime. $200,000, almost a third of my newfound freedom. And what if I don't want to invest?" Silence. Then, that voice I knew so well. The voice he used when things didn't go his way. "Well, that's your decision, of course. But I hope you understand that if you can't help your own family when they need it, it's going to be hard for Isabella to understand why she should maintain a relationship with you." There was the threat, wrapped in careful words but clear as day. money in exchange for access to my granddaughter. Ethan, tell me one thing honestly. If I didn't have this money from the sale of the apartment, would you have called to fix things? Another silence. Longer this time. That's a strange question, Mom. No, it's a simple question. Would you have called me? The circumstances are what they are. Answer yes or no. Look, there's no point in speculating about hypotheticals. There was my answer. Ethan, listen to me carefully because I'm only going to say this once. For 35 years, I have bought your love with sacrifice, money, and silence. I have allowed you to turn me into a dispensing machine for emotional and financial resources. But that's over. Mom, I'm not finished. The money I have now is mine. I earned it by working for 40 years, living in tiny apartments so you could have the best, eating sandwiches so you could have dinner at nice restaurants. I am not investing a single dollar in your business. Are you crazy? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What's once in a lifetime is that for the first time, I have the freedom to say no. And I'm saying no. To you, to your projects, to your manipulations, and to your threats. And Isabella? Isabella will have the grandmother she deserves. A woman who respects herself, who doesn't beg for affection, who doesn't buy love. If you decide to keep her from me because I won't give you money, that will be your decision. But I am no longer negotiating with my dignity. I hung up. That afternoon, I went back to the travel agency. I've decided. I want the 3-week tour of Italy, leaving next month. Excellent choice. It will be a wonderful experience. I paid the $5,000 for the trip without batting an eye. It was my money, my decision, my freedom. For the first time in decades, I was investing in myself. That night, as I packed a suitcase I hadn't used in years, I looked at myself in the bedroom mirror. I saw a 68-year-old woman who had just made the bravest decision of her life. I was no longer the mother who begged for love. I was Helen Carter, a free woman with $2.5 million, a valid passport, and all the time in the world to discover who she was when no one expected anything from her. The phone rang again. This time I didn't answer. I had more important things to do, like deciding which dresses to take to Rome. On Wednesday morning, as I was having breakfast on my balcony reading a Rome travel guide, the doorbell rang with an insistence that made my skin crawl. It wasn't the polite ring of a neighbor or the mailman. It was the ring of someone furious. I looked through the peephole. Ethan was there, but he wasn't alone. Jessica was with him, and behind them, I could see an older man in an elegant suit whom I immediately recognized. Jessica's father, Edward Morgan, the director of a financial consulting firm that managed multi-million-dollar estates. All three of them wore the serious expressions reserved for family interventions. They were coming for me. I opened the door with the calm of someone who has nothing left to lose. Good morning. To what do I owe the honor of this early visit? Edward stepped forward with the authority that comes from years of managing other people's fortunes and making decisions that affect the financial future of entire families. Helen, I'm Edward Morgan. I believe we met at the wedding. May we come in? We need to discuss a very serious matter. I let them into my small living room, where my 3 mismatched chairs and modest sofa seemed even humbler in the presence of a man accustomed to offices with panoramic views and designer furniture. Edward perched on the edge of the sofa, with the posture of someone who doesn't plan to stay long. Jessica and Ethan remained standing, flanking him like well-dressed bodyguards. Helen, Ethan has brought me up to speed on the current situation, and I must tell you, I'm very concerned. Concerned about what? About the financial decisions you're making. Selling a $2.5 million property impulsively, refusing solid investment opportunities, spending money on unnecessary trips. His eyes landed on my Rome guidebook on the table. These are red flags we cannot ignore. Red flags. As if spending my own money on my own happiness were a symptom of senile dementia. Mr. Morgan, I appreciate your concern, but I don't see what you have to do with my financial decisions. I have everything to do with it because Isabella is my granddaughter too. And when a grandmother starts making irrational decisions that could affect her assets and, consequently, the child's future, the family has to step in. Jessica cleared her throat and pulled out a folder she was carrying. Helen, we've been speaking with an attorney who specializes in family law. There is a legal procedure for when elderly grandparents show signs of cognitive decline that leads them to make decisions detrimental to their estate and the well-being of their heirs. The words fell like stones in the silence of my living room. Cognitive decline. They were accusing me of being crazy to justify an attempt to take control of my money. Are you threatening to have me declared incompetent? Ethan finally spoke, his voice soft, the way he made it when he wanted to seem reasonable while stabbing me in the back. It's not a threat, Mom. It's a legitimate concern. You've shown very erratic behavior in recent months, selling the apartment without consulting anyone, refusing obvious investment opportunities, isolating yourself from the family. Isolating myself from the family? You yourself told me I ruined the photos, and I already apologized for that. But your reaction was completely disproportionate. An emotionally stable person doesn't destroy their own family's life over an argument. Edward took control of the conversation again, with the efficiency of someone accustomed to handling family crises related to large estates. Helen, we are going to make you a proposal. A reasonable one that protects both your interests and Isabella's. He took some documents out of his Italian leather briefcase. We can establish a trust. You would retain a generous monthly pension for all your personal expenses, but the bulk of the assets would be protected for Isabella. Ethan and Jessica would be the trustees, with my professional oversight, ensuring the money is invested intelligently and grows for the child's future. A pension. As if I were a retired employee being given a monthly tip for years of service. And if I don't accept? The three of them exchanged significant looks. Jessica was the one who answered. Then we would be forced to initiate legal proceedings. We have documentation of your erratic behavior, testimonies from mental health professionals about the risks of depression and isolation in women your age. What professionals? When have I ever spoken to a mental health professional? Dr. Ramirez, your primary care physician, is concerned about your emotional state since you were widowed. I'm not a widow. I got divorced 15 years ago. Since your separation, my apologies, Edward corrected without flinching. The point is, there is a pattern of social isolation, impulsive financial decisions, and aggressive behavior toward the family that could indicate. I stood up. I had heard enough. Get out of my house. Now. Ethan approached, trying to take my hand with that fake tenderness he had perfected over the years. Mom, we don't want to fight with you. We just want to take care of you. And take care of Isabella's future. Isabella. Always Isabella. I pulled my hand away. You know what the saddest part of all this is? You're using that little girl as an excuse to rob me. You don't even have the decency to be honest about your motives. No one wants to rob you, Jessica said with the condescending tone she had perfected for dealing with housekeepers and waiters. We just want to ensure the money is well managed. By you, by professionals. Edward has decades of experience managing large estates. Large estates? I laughed, and the sound came out more bitter than I expected. Mr. Morgan, do you know how I got this $2.5 million? Edward looked at me with the exaggerated patience one uses with children and the elderly. I imagine it was a very shrewd investment decision. It was from selling my mother's jewelry to pay for his college education. I pointed at Ethan. It was from working double shifts for 20 years at the hospital. It was from living in 400-square-foot apartments so he could have the best. It was from not buying myself a new coat for 10 years so he could go on an exchange program to London. Edward's expression shifted slightly. For the first time, he seemed to be actually listening. That money isn't an inheritance that fell from the sky. It's my life. It's my ground-down bones from working night shifts. It's my tears every time I had to choose between his needs and mine, and I always chose his. Mom, Ethan tried to interrupt, but I was already on fire. No, now you listen to me. For 35 years, I have been your emotional and financial ATM. I gave you everything I had and everything I didn't. And when I finally decide to spend my money on myself, you come here with lawyers to declare me crazy. I turned to Edward directly, looking him in the eye with an intensity that made him shrink back on the sofa. Mr. Morgan, you manage fortunes for billionaires. Tell me, Have any of your rich clients ever had to justify why they want to buy a yacht or a house in the Hamptons? Have their children ever come to you asking if dad is mentally competent because he wants to spend $100,000 on a watch? That's different. Why is it different? Because I'm a woman? Because I'm older? Or because you see my money as yours by birthright? Jessica shifted nervously, looking at her father as if asking him to regain control of a situation that was slipping through their fingers. Helen, you're being very emotional. This is exactly what worries us. Emotional? I turned to her, my voice filled with a fury I had been holding back for years. You want to know what's emotional, Jessica? Emotional is working for 40 years so your son can have a better life than you did, only for him to tell you that you ruined the photos. Emotional is you coming into my home to accuse me of being crazy because I won't give you my money. No one is accusing you of anything. You're threatening to have me declared incompetent. What do you call that? Edward stood up, stuffing the papers back into his briefcase with abrupt movements. Helen, I think this conversation proves our point exactly. You're agitated, aggressive. You can't have a rational discussion about your financial future. My financial future is already decided, Mr. Morgan. I'm going to spend it on myself. Every dollar, every last cent. I'm going to travel. I'm going to eat at expensive restaurants. I'm going to buy myself beautiful clothes. I'm going to live in a bigger apartment if I feel like it. I am going to do everything I couldn't do for 40 years because I was too busy financing other people's lives. The three of them stared at me as if I had just confirmed their diagnosis of senile dementia. And Isabella? Ethan asked, his voice cracking in that way he used as a child to get what he wanted. Isabella will have what every child should have. A grandmother who respects herself, a woman who doesn't beg for love or buy affection. If you decide that's not enough, that's your decision. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Now get out of my house. And if you come back with conservatorship papers, I swear I'll be on a plane to Italy tomorrow, and you won't hear from me until I've spent every last cent on the life I deserve. Ethan was the last one to leave. He paused at the threshold and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, as if he were finally seeing a real person instead of the function I had served in his life. Are you really going to do this, Mom? Are you really going to choose money over your family? The question hurt more than all the legal threats in the world, because it proved that after everything, he still didn't understand. Ethan, I'm not choosing money over family. I'm choosing dignity over manipulation. There's a difference. I closed the door. On the other side, I heard their voices fading down the hall, discussing legal strategies and deadlines as if I were a business problem to be solved. I leaned against the door, trembling, but not from fear, from freedom. For the first time in my life, I had said no to everything. To manipulation, to threats, to guilt, to emotional blackmail. And I was still standing. That afternoon, I called the travel agency. Can you change my flight? I'd like to leave next week instead of next month. Of course, Ms. Carter. Any special reason for moving the trip up? I looked out the window at New York, at the life I had lived for 68 years meeting everyone else's expectations. Yes, I'm in a hurry to start living. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of a small cafe in Trastevere, Rome, watching the sunset paint the medieval facades gold as I savored my second Aperol spritz of the day. Yes, second. Because at 68, I had discovered I was allowed to have 2 cocktails if I felt like it, without having to explain why to anyone or ask permission from my maternal conscience. My phone rang. It was a number with a New York area code that I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Since leaving New York 6 months ago, my phone had rung exactly 347 times. I knew because, at first, I counted each missed call as a small victory. Ethan, Jessica. Unknown numbers that were probably lawyers or private investigators trying to locate me for the conservatorship proceedings they had apparently initiated. But it turns out, it's very difficult to have someone declared incompetent when they're living their dream life in another country, sending postcards from every city they visit, and documenting their sanity on social media, which I had learned to use better than many young people. My Instagram account, Helen Travels Free, already had 15,000 followers. Women my age and older wrote me private messages telling me their own stories of late-in-life liberation, of manipulative children, of families who treated them like emotional ATMs. "Helen, you're my inspiration," wrote Deborah from Savannah. "After seeing your pictures in Florence, I told my son I'm no longer babysitting his twins for free every weekend. If he wants a sitter, he can pay for one. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to choose yourself." Patricia from Scottsdale had sent, "I just bought a ticket to Thailand. I'm traveling alone for the first time in my life." Every message was a confirmation that my story wasn't unique. There were thousands of us, women who had given so much that we had forgotten who we were when no one needed anything from us. The first week in Rome had been terrifying, not because of the city, which had welcomed me with the chaotic hospitality only ancient cities accustomed to foreigners can offer. What was terrifying was the feeling of not having to call anyone to say where I was, of not having to justify spending $60 on dinner for one, of being able to stay out until 11 at night, walking the cobblestone streets without anyone asking if it wasn't too late for a woman my age. The second week had been revealing. I discovered I had opinions on art I had never been able to express, that I enjoyed live music I never had time to listen to, that I liked spicy food I could never cook because it gave Ethan heartburn. The third week had been transformative. I met Giuseppe, a 72-year-old Italian widower who ran a small trattoria near the Pantheon. It wasn't a movie-style romance. We were too old and too wise for such fantasies. It was something better, a friendship between two people who had spent decades caring for others and were now learning to care for themselves. Giuseppe taught me how to make fresh pasta. I taught him a few words of English. We laughed about our adult children, their impossible expectations, the way they assumed our lives revolved around theirs. "La mia figlia viene a trovarmi una volta all'anno," Giuseppe would tell me as we kneaded fettuccine. "E ogni volta mi chiede perché non ho venduto il ristorante per comprare un appartamento più piccolo vicino a lei. Non capisce che questo ristorante è la mia vita, non solo denaro. My daughter visits once a year, and every time she asks why I haven't sold the restaurant to buy a smaller apartment near her. She doesn't understand that this restaurant is my life, not just money, just like my son," I'd reply in my increasingly fluent Italian. "They think we are accessories to their lives, not people with our own dreams." After Rome came Florence, where I enrolled in an art history course I had always wanted to take but never had time for. Then Venice, where I learned that riding the Vaporetto was like a form of water meditation. Then Tuscany, where I spent a month at a country villa learning to paint with watercolors with a group of international women who had decided to reinvent their lives after 60. In that course, I met Margaret, a 74-year-old Englishwoman who had stopped speaking to her 3 children after they tried to put her in a nursing home to get their hands on her country house. Sarah, a 66-year-old German who founded a travel company for older women after her family treated her like a burden. And Francine, a 71-year-old French woman who had written a best-selling book about freedom after 70. We all had similar stories. We had all reached a point where choosing dignity meant disappointing families who saw us as resources instead of people. "The problem," Margaret would say as she painted a vineyard under the Tuscan sun, "is that we raised our children to be the center of the universe, and when they grew up, they continued to expect the universe to revolve around them. In my case," Sarah added, "I gave them so much they never learned to value what they received. Everything was free, everything was taken for granted. My children saw me as an investment," Francine reflected. "They invested minimal affection, expecting maximum returns for their entire lives." One afternoon, while in my room at the small boutique hotel I had chosen in the center of Siena, my phone rang with a number I did recognize. It was from Isabella's school. "Ms. Carter? This is the principal of St. Patrick's Academy. We're trying to contact Isabella Carter's parents, but we can't reach them. According to our records, you're listed as an emergency contact." My heart raced. Isabella, my granddaughter. No matter how much I had cut ties with Ethan and Jessica, Isabella was still innocent in all of this. "Has something happened?" "Isabella had a small accident on the playground. Nothing serious, but we need someone to pick her up and take her to a doctor as a precaution. We've been calling her parents for 2 hours. I'm in Italy. I can't pick her up." "Italy? But is there any other family member available?" "Try the maternal grandparents. Edward and Catherine Morgan. We already did. They're on a trip to Argentina. Please, Ms. Carter, we need you to contact the child's parents or give us another number. I hung up and immediately dialed Ethan's number. It went to voicemail. I called Jessica. Same thing. For the next 30 minutes from my room in Siena, I coordinated my granddaughter's rescue over the phone. I called a nurse friend I still had in New York, gave her the school's information, and asked her to pick up Isabella and take her to the hospital. 2 hours later, Maria called to confirm that Isabella was fine. Just a small bump on the head, nothing serious. But there was something in her voice that unsettled me. Helen, when I got to the school, the girl had been there since 2 o'clock. It's 6 now. The parents were nowhere to be found. And where were they? They finally showed up when we were already at the hospital. They were coming from... I don't know how to tell you this. They were coming from a meeting with lawyers. About an inheritance issue, they told me. Inheritance. They were still trying to have me declared incompetent, still fighting for my money, while their daughter was in the emergency room and they weren't even answering their phones. Helen, Maria continued, the little girl asked about you. She said she hadn't seen you in a long time, that she didn't understand why you didn't come to her house anymore. I couldn't sleep that night. I stood on my balcony, watching the lights of Siena twinkle in the distance, thinking about Isabella asking for me while her parents were too busy trying to rob me to take care of her. The next morning, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. I called an American lawyer from Italy. I want to establish an educational trust fund for my granddaughter, a fund she can use when she turns 18 for college or whatever she needs. But with one condition, her parents cannot access that money under any circumstances. What amount are you considering, Ms. Carter? $150,000. It was a significant amount. Enough to ensure Isabella would have options in her future, but not so large that her parents could use it as an excuse to keep chasing me. The rest of the money would remain mine. For my travels, for my new life, for the woman I had taken 68 years to meet. That afternoon, while strolling through the medieval streets of Siena, my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Isabella, smiling, holding up a drawing she had made in class. The drawing showed a woman with gray hair on an airplane, and underneath, in a child's handwriting, it said, "My Nana traveling. I love you, Nana." The message came with a text. "Hi, Helen. This is Isabella's teacher. She asked me to send you this drawing. She told me she misses traveling with her grandmother. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to write to you, but she talks about you a lot in class." I sat down in a small piazza, Isabella's drawing on my phone screen, and for the first time in months, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were the tears of a woman who had finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity for them, and that sometimes, the best way to care for those you love is to teach them that you deserve to be cared for too. A year after that terrible day when my son told me I ruined the photos, I was sitting in my new apartment in the West Village, decorating with my own hands the place I now called home. It was no longer the small, modest apartment in Greenpoint. With part of my savings, I had bought a bright 2-bedroom apartment with a Juliet balcony overlooking a street full of life, bohemian cafes, and independent bookstores. On the walls hung photographs from my travels, me in front of the Colosseum, painting watercolors in Tuscany, learning to make pasta with Giuseppe, laughing with Margaret and Sarah on a terrace in Florence. Each image told the story of a woman who had discovered that life could begin at any age, as long as you had the courage to claim it. The doorbell rang, and my heart skipped a beat. After a year of total silence, I had learned to live without the constant drama of desperate calls, legal threats, and manipulation attempts. But a part of me always wondered if one day I looked through the peephole. It was Ethan, alone, without Jessica, without lawyers, without his billionaire father-in-law. He was wearing wrinkled clothes, his eyes red like someone who hadn't slept well in days, and in his hands, he held a letter. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded different, smaller, like when he was a boy and had broken something valuable and knew he had to face the consequences. "Ethan, I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably don't want to see me after everything that happened, but I need to give you this." He held out the letter with slightly trembling hands. "It's from Isabella. She doesn't know I'm here. In fact, she doesn't know a lot of things. I took the letter. The envelope had my name written in the careful print of a 6-year-old trying to make her letters perfect. For traveling Nana Helen. Can I come in? Just for 5 minutes. There are things I need to say. I let him in but remained standing by the open door. I wasn't going to repeat past mistakes. Ethan looked around the apartment with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Surprise, maybe. Or an acknowledgement that I was capable of creating a beautiful home when I didn't have to justify every dollar spent. It's very nice. You look happy here. I am. Mom, He stopped, took a deep breath. I need to apologize. Not the kind of apology we give when we want something in return. A real one. For everything. I stayed silent. Waiting. I had learned that cheap words were distinguished from genuine ones by the effort it took to say them. The conservatorship case was dismissed 3 months ago. The judge said a woman who runs an Instagram account with 15,000 followers, travels internationally, and has established an educational trust for her granddaughter shows no signs of cognitive decline. An involuntary smile touched my lips. The irony was delicious. But that's not the important part. The important thing is, we lost the house. What do you mean? Without the apartment you lent us, we had to rent in a more expensive area. My investments didn't pan out. Clients left when they heard about the legal troubles. Jessica. He stopped, as if the words burned his throat. Jessica left me. She took Isabella and moved in with her parents in Argentina. I looked at him without expression. I didn't feel joy at his suffering, but I also didn't feel the automatic compassion I had felt for his problems for so many years. I'm sorry. Isabella asks about you constantly. Jessica tells her you're sick. That's why you can't see her. But Isabella is smart. She knows something isn't right. I opened the letter carefully. Inside was a drawing of a house with 2 figures, a smaller one with pigtails and a larger one with gray hair. Underneath it said, I want you to come home, Nana. I miss you. The words went straight to my heart, but no longer with the blind desperation of before. I now had the perspective of a woman who had learned to distinguish between genuine love and emotional manipulation. Ethan, why are you really here? Because you were right. About everything. The words came out as if he'd been holding them in for months. You raised me alone. You worked to give me everything. You sacrificed your life for my future. And I became someone who was ashamed of you. Someone who saw you as an obstacle to the life I wanted to have. He sat on the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. When Jessica left, she left me a letter. Do you know what it said? That I was exactly the kind of man she would never want for Isabella. Someone incapable of valuing the women who love him. Someone who takes and takes until the people who love him are empty. I remained silent. It was his moment to face the truth. She said she saw how I treated you, how I took everything you did for granted, how I turned you into an unpaid emotional housekeeper. And she wasn't going to let me do the same thing to Isabella. And what do you think? That she was right. Completely. I destroyed the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. For money, for status, for the approval of people who, in the end, didn't really matter. He stood up and walked to the window, looking at the vibrant street below. You know what's most ironic? For all these months, I've been following your Instagram account, watching you glow, looking younger, happier, more alive than you have in years. And I realized that I had never seen you like that when you were with me. Because with you, I couldn't be myself. I had to be the perfect mother, the available grandmother, the woman who never said no. And I took advantage of that. For 35 years, I took advantage of the fact that you would never say no, that you would always put my needs above your own, that you would rather suffer in silence than disappoint me. He turned to me, tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm not here to ask for money. I'm not here to ask you to fix my life again. I'm here to tell you that I'm glad you said enough. I'm glad you chose yourself, even though it hurts me, even though it cost me everything to understand it. It was the first time in my life I had heard my son speak with such brutal honesty. No excuses, no justifications, no attempts to minimize his responsibility. What do you want, Ethan? I want to earn it. I want to earn it all back. Your forgiveness, your respect, the right to be in your life. but for real this time. Not as the son who expects mom to fix everything, but as the adult I should have been years ago. And how do you plan on doing that? I don't know. I guess by starting here. By admitting everything I did wrong. By not expecting you to forgive me immediately just because I apologize. By understanding that maybe you can never forgive me. And that would be fair. I walked over to him, and for the first time in over a year, I really looked at him. He was no longer the boy I had raised, nor the arrogant man who had humiliated me. He was a broken person trying to rebuild himself from scratch. Ethan, I'm going to tell you something it took me 68 years to learn. True love isn't about sacrificing yourself until you disappear. True love is respecting yourself enough to demand that others respect you. I know that now. If you really want to be in my life, if you really want Isabella to know me, it's going to be on my terms. I am not going back to being the emergency grandmother who shows up when she's needed and disappears when she doesn't fit into your plans. I understand. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more using Isabella as an emotional bargaining chip. I promise. And no more shame. If you're embarrassed to introduce me to your friends, if my social class or my clothes or my quirks bother you, then we have nothing to talk about. Mom, He stopped, then smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. You know what? I'm proud of you. Genuinely proud. My mother is a woman who, at 68, had the courage to completely remake her life, who created an online community inspiring other women, who learned Italian and painting and became someone I had never really known. Because you never took the time to know me. You're right, but if you're willing, I'd like to try now. I looked at him for a long moment. Forgiveness wasn't something I could force or plan, but it also wasn't something I wanted to deny forever if the person in front of me was genuine in their remorse. Ethan, I'll be in New York for the next few months. Then I'm going back to Italy. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, you have to do it knowing that my life no longer revolves around yours. I have plans, projects, a life that makes me happy. That's perfect. And as for Isabella, if one day she wants to know her real grandmother, not the version others have created of me, she'll be able to find me. But I am not going to beg for a relationship with my granddaughter. I'm going to fight to bring her back. Not for me, for her. So she has the chance to know the extraordinary woman her grandmother is. We stood in silence for a few minutes. The golden light of the New York sunset streamed through the window, illuminating my apartment filled with evidence of my new life. Mom, one last thing. The apartment you sold. It was yours. It was always yours. You had every right to do what you wanted with it. And I never thanked you. Not for the apartment, not for college, not for the sacrifices, not for the love, nothing. I took it all for granted. Thank you for saying that. Can I hug you? I looked at him for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then I nodded. The hug was different from any we had shared before. It wasn't the desperate hug of a child seeking comfort, nor the automatic hug of family goodbyes. It was the hug of two adults who recognized each other as whole people, with their own dreams and flaws. When he left, I sat on my new sofa, looking at Isabella's letter and the photos from my travels. My phone buzzed with a new Instagram message from a 70-year-old woman in Florida. Helen, your story gave me the courage to tell my daughter I'm not selling my house to her below market value. For the first time in my life, I chose my future over her whims. I smiled. My personal story had become something bigger, an invitation for other women to realize it was never too late to reclaim their dignity. That night, before going to sleep, I wrote a post on my Instagram. A year ago, my son told me I ruined the photos. Today, I understand that my whole life I had been trying to fit into other people's pictures, into lives designed by others, into stories where I was just a supporting character. But now, I have my own photos. Photos where I am the star of my own story. Photos where I don't have to ask permission to shine. To all the women reading this, you are not accessories in other people's lives. You are the protagonists of your own stories. And it is never, ever too late to start acting like it. The post got 2,000 likes in an hour. The next day, I received an unexpected message. It was from an email address ending in .r, Argentina. Dear Miss Carter, I am Isabella's school principal. The child speaks of you constantly and asked me to write to you. She has shown us pictures she keeps of your travels. She asked me to tell you that she also wants to travel and see the world when she grows up, just like her grandmother. Isabella is a very special girl, and it saddens me to see how much she misses someone who clearly loves her. The message ended with a line that made me smile through tears. P.S. Isabella told me that when she grows up, she won't let anyone tell her she ruins the photos, because the people we love always make the pictures more beautiful. I put down my phone and looked out my window at New York City, at America, at the entire life I had ahead of me. At 68, I had learned the most important lesson of all, that loving someone doesn't mean disappearing for them. It means respecting yourself enough to teach them how they must treat you. And sometimes, teaching that lesson hurts. But in the end, it's the greatest gift you can give someone you love, the chance to love you for real, not just for what you can give them, but for who you truly are. And now I ask you, have you ever been in a similar situation? Do you know someone who has gone through something like this? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel. Your support can help this message reach someone who really needs to hear it today.